Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Dharma Junkie Podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by some of my Nashville family from Wildheart Meditation Center, my friend Rachael Tanner-Smith, and my friend, teacher, and mentor, Mikey Noechel. We sat down to talk about their upcoming practice intensive on Buddhist psychology and the Five Aggregates that's happening April 15th at Wildheart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. We also talk about how the Dharma came into their lives, 90s hip-hop. I heard a new term, sideways mullet, which I thought was really good. And Mikey and Rachael unpack what the Five Aggregates are and explain how by clinging to them, all of our suffering is pretty much created. So what we do is we basically just nerd out on the Dharma, which is really like one of my favorite things to do. So this was a super fun episode to record, and I love both Rachael and Mikey very dearly. And I wouldn't be where I'm at without both of those people. So anyway, I'm not gonna chit chat too much longer. So check this episode out. I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, Rachael Tanner-Smith and Mikey Noechel.
You might catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state. Just relax and enjoy it. Just relax and enjoy it.
This is an experiment in mind formation. Information, forming, controlling, operating your mind and your brain. Using digital techniques to overload, scramble, confuse, unfocus your mind. The natural state of the brain is chaos. Chaos is beautiful.
What's up, y'all?
What's up? Peace and love. Peace and love.
So welcome to the Dharma Junkie Podcast, Mikey Noechel and Rachael Tanner-Smith. How are you doing?
Yo, what's up? Peace and love. Peace and love. It is delightful seeing your face, Justin. I love you.
I love both of you. You're like my family. Away from my family. You're like the family I actually like that I will actually travel to go see.
That's nice.
The other family, I'm just like, I don't feel like making it up right now, but I'm actively planning to come to your upcoming retreat on April 15th.
Hell yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So that's a retreat on Buddhist psychology.
Yeah. So we have a retreat coming up, April 15th, Saturday at Wildheart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the essence of Buddhist psychology. And what the essence of Buddhist psychology is this concept called anatta, which really means not self. And so what we're doing is taking the whole day from 9 to 5 to diligently deconstruct the self through practices around the Five Aggregates. So like I like to say, don't you notice all your stress has a main character?
Oh, 100%.
And who is that main character?
Generally me.
Yeah, exactly. So this practice of looking at the self and how it's created as a construct within the mind, it has the intention to free ourselves from the self-centered thoughts that lead to a shit ton of stress in our lives. So I love, like, at the top, you're like, okay, what are we going to promote right now? And it's like the fucking retreat. So thank you for that, Justin.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get the word out because I feel that this is a very important topic as far as, the Dharma is concerned and as far as like mental health in general is concerned.
Kind of like topic, right? Like the most important topic. And this is our first like inaugural run of this workshop too, which I'm so excited about. I don't think that we've done an intensive of any sort at Wildheart on this. So yeah, we were sitting in a leadership retreat recently and we were just listening to 90s hip hop afterwards to break silence and talking about the Dharma. Mikey had a lot of good playlist selections, and this idea for this workshop also occurred at the same time. So
That's awesome. It sounds like a beautiful birth of a beautiful thing.
Right.
So, okay, maybe this is going on a tangent, but what gave birth to 90s hip hop after our retreat was Rachel was cleaning the kitchen and in relative silence, and she said something about hand me the dip. And that's probably the only words I heard all week. And my mind went into that song, The Dip. I put your hand up on your hip and I dip, you dip, we dip. And so the rest of the treat, I had that in my mind. We break silence and we're just breaking out 90s like dance hip hop. Yeah.
That was a good song.
Yes.
Maybe that came out like 95, I think. I remember riding the bus in 1995 to Washington High School and like people singing that song like loudly, like not like under their breath, but like very loudly. Yeah, it was a good time.
As they should.
So how did you guys come to the idea of doing this full day workshop on this particular topic? Like, how did you arrive at that?
Yeah, fun thing about this topic, which Mikey and I have laughed about repeatedly, is this ironic piece where like we have to use the conceptual mind and teach about concepts, but we're using conceptual mind to go beyond conceptual mind. And so it's the fun task of how do you do that with a group of people with varying levels of practice. And so, trying to function within that absurdity, I think helped us aim this thing at being really practice focused, less talking, more doing. So
yeah, don't talk about it, be about it.
Do it. So we have a practice intensive, not a workshop, not a teaching lecture, not a day long. Yeah, we decided to call it practice intensive. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's super cool. Yeah, and this is a really difficult topic, I think, for a lot of people to really grasp. Like the non-self concept is just generally, it takes a while for it to really click. I know it did for me at first when I first got involved with the Dharma. It was a hot minute before I was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
And I think there's like layers of unfolding not self. We could look at the first layer, just understanding that when we take shit personally, we suffer. And so even teachers like Tara Brach will call it selfing. And like even Brene Brown, the difference between shame and guilt. That guilt is, I made a mistake. Shame is, I am a mistake. And so when we overly self-identify with our emotions and with our experience, from there, we don't have to fully come to grips with not self, but we can just get just a little relief at the beginning when we go, damn, I take a lot of things personally. Our thoughts, like we believe every thought as self. And we believe we are these bodies. We believe we are our jobs, me, I, and mine. That just leads to so much stress. So I don't know if we really need to know deep down to have that earth-shattering insight to get the benefit of anatta, not self, just from the beginning. We could just have that taste and get some freedom.
Yeah. I think you're pretty spot on with that. And I think it should be noted too, at least in my experience, that even having had that kind of earth shattering, not self experience, I still fall back into the same shit. And I'm like, I take shit incredibly personally. I was taking some shit personally just before we started doing this podcast. I was wrapped up in my feelings about some shit that I can't control. And I was like, oh, it's gotta be me. Right.
And that's how it is. Try to even take in that personally, that we take shit personally.
Right. And, and it's funny. All we do is just forget. All we do is just fall back asleep all the time. It's like trying to just come back and come back and come back and come back. And, even doing what I do and, having been doing it for a while now, it's like, I still fall asleep all the time. Like I did it. Like I said, it was literally just a couple hours ago. I was all in my feelings about some shit that's like completely out of my control and has nothing to do with me as a person, but rest assured, I took it very personally.
Yeah. As we do.
Yeah, it seems to be the nature of things, right?
It's like one of my favorite things about all these Dharma practices is we get to like look at how something that has been very functional and helpful in many ways, like in terms of just like staying alive in general and the brain doing its job to keep the body alive, is really counterproductive to long-term happiness and like existential well-being. It's like, taking my own shit personally, like helps me stay alive and stay functional, but man, it does not end up being a good strategy for long-term happiness. So like this is curious, in between state to start to explore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a friend of mine actually has this really good quote. He said, the ego is the part of you that will get you out of a burning building if it's on fire. Unfortunately, it's also the part of you that probably started the fire in the first place.
Truth.
Right.
So I'd like to can just kind of get an introduction from you guys. We haven't really done that yet. So Mikey, you want to just tell everybody about yourself and like how you got into this practice and how you arrived at what you're doing today and what you're doing today?
Yeah. It's kind of silly that I'm on podcasts or that I have a voice in the Dharma, because my story, while I know you interview people with these elaborate backgrounds or enlightened masters, even some of the people you have interviewed, I'm just a suburban kid from Northwest Florida that suffers, right? I come from an alcoholic family. I have a very relatable story. I come from an alcoholic family that hid a lot of suffering, and I found myself in punk rock, where that's where I was looking for the validation of suffering. But in that community, I got some relief, but never really fully got me out of my suffering. So luckily, I found the Buddhist path that validated my suffering, as well as found a way out of my suffering. So that's just like the quick run over that. Just, how the fuck did I end up in Buddhism? I don't know, just dumb luck. I won the lottery. It's so beautiful that I have this practice, and I'm deeply grateful for it.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know, did you have any questions specifically about my life?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to some as this podcast unfolds. How about you, Rachael? How did you come to the Dharma, or how did the Dharma come to you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think Mikey and I are similar-ish, and I think maybe we're all three similar-ish in age, which means like growing up before the internet and social media and cell phones existed. And so I'm just always like dumbfounded by the fact that like Dharma came into my life at all, given that that was the case. And yeah, I don't know, similar to Mikey, I grew up in the South, like in, very rural Kentucky and Tennessee, and um, living just with all the things that you would expect in the rural, impoverished South, and really struggled throughout my teenage years and my 20s, and came into Dharma practice as part of my recovery practice initially. And then it just kind of bloomed from there.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, Mikey, I think you also came into this practice as I think it kind of, this practice led to your recovery, right? You didn't come into it for recovery, but it kind of led ultimately to your recovery, right?
Yeah, I got into this practice because, my own addiction recovery is definitely at the forefront, but also I'm an adult child of an alcoholic, codependency in the family, and all of these very diagnosable things. But at the time, I just knew I was fucking suffering. And the Dharma was like, hey, are you suffering? Come on in. And so, yeah, when I started looking at my suffering, sure, it took me down specific avenues, but the doorway was dukkha, First Noble Truth. Look, there's suffering here. And when I started looking that there was suffering there, and being around a sangha, a community that had resources, because I had zero resources. My resources were alcohol and cocaine, and so when I walked into a Dharma hall, they said, hey, we got some resources for you. But that oddly enough, that was my first introduction to recovery, mental health, spirituality, was Buddhism. And that's kind of, like I said, I won the lottery. Pretty dumb luck to be in Northwest Florida, the Southeast United States, and Buddhism is the one that introduced me to mainstream mental health, right?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, for sure, man. So yeah, suffering. Yeah, I think isn't that how most of us end up on this path, is just suffering.
Yeah.
And but the First Noble Truth being like, yeah, it's going to be like that. It's kind of really, that was really validating for me. Just like, oh, okay, so it's not just me. Like, that's just life.
What a relief, right? Be like, oh, right. God, it's that first taste of like, oh shit, it's not actually just me here, Right.
Yet again, that whole taking it personal thing, like that's all just happening to me and me alone. And it was very, very, very reliefful that, it was very relieving to know that I'm not alone in that. It's like, no, everybody's going through this shit. Everybody goes through the same shit. It's just your turn right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like my Dharma practice started. I had been in recovery for a couple of years at that point, and like a lot of just recovery work had been really, really helpful at helping me like relate to my thinking mind in a very different way, which was helpful. And then I was finishing up graduate school, and then two close friends committed suicide in about a 6-month period. And I changed jobs and I bought a house, like a bunch of stressors happening. And I was just like, oh my God, what do I do with this like really profound grief that has nothing to do with the thinking? Grief is so in the body. And I was just like, this is not, something else has got to happen here. And was able to find a local sitting group. And it's so funny when I look back at like why I started meditating. Purely avoidance, purely driven by avoidance. I was like, these are the people that are going to help me not feel my feelings. It's going to be fantastic. And they will help me learn to not think. And so, of course, they're like, oh, yeah, we're not going to help you with any of that. You're totally in the right place. Keep coming back. And, of course, they didn't help me avoid my feelings or learn how to stop thinking. But man, what an awesome thing to do instead. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. That's kind of like how I got into meditation as well. I was like, I'm going to use this as an avoidance tactic. And it didn't really work that way for me either.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it did at first, but then, as my practice continued, it just started like things started to unfold. And it's like, oh, wait, I can't turn this thing off. There's no off switch to this thing. Yeah, no off button for the mind, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, I love silence.
Yeah, me too. It is nice. So, Rachael, you just stepped down as the director for Wildheart Meditation Center, right?
I did, yeah. Which means Mikey just moved into a new position also. But it's interesting. I was thinking about kind of my history, since we're talking a little bit about the workshop today and Buddhist psychology. I was thinking about the first time I had some exposure to Buddhist psychology and this model of the aggregates. And it was way back when, like very soon after I started attending the sitting group, which is now Wildheart, but at the time was Against the Stream Nashville. And I remember Dave Smith teaching a workshop on the aggregates and Buddhist psychology. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening right now in this workshop at all, but it seems really interesting. And moreover, the practices are really meaningful. So I think I want to check into this practice piece of things. But gosh, that was 12-ish years ago, maybe. But yeah, I've been so fortunate recently to, be in a co-director role at Wildheart. And I'm so excited that number one, our Sangha survived COVID. And number two, I think came out much more, just more diverse and rich and engaged kind of on the other side of COVID. And that included like not only the people in the Sangha, but we've really made an attempt to strengthen our leadership committee and grow kind of input and leadership. Andrew Chapman and I were kind of serving as co-directors before, and we just never wanted Wildheart to be this like cult of personality, like Rachael and Andrew show. Would have been the Andrew show, honestly, not the Rachael show, but we never wanted that. And so have been really intentional about expanding kind of who's involved. And it was so lovely to step down out of that role. It was like the nicest thing. And I think it went really well. Like a successful transition of leadership is a pretty big deal, actually, I think. So.
Right on. Yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony too. It was a really nice. I really enjoyed that. It was nice to be a part of that and seeing the changing of the guard, so to speak. But knowing that, that Andrew and yourself are both still very present and, still part of the board and still very much a part of the Wildheart community. And I just think what you guys are doing is such an amazing thing, and amazing that it did survive COVID, because I'm sure it was very up in the air at that point. Like, we don't know if we're going to be able to stay open. We don't know what's going to happen. And for you guys to have pulled through that, it just is a testament to not only the strength of the leadership, but also the Sangha itself.
Absolutely.
So, as Rachael was saying, Mikey, you just took on a new role with Wildheart. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. I took on the task of being the guiding teacher and, following Andrew Chapman, my like right-hand man who I've been teaching retreats with and workshops with and doing, been around him for a long time, as well as Rachael too, right? Like we've been kind of, they were here first, right? They were in Nashville before I was here, and I kind of just like tagged along. I remember when I first came to Nashville, like Dave Smith was doing this year-long study program, and I came into Nashville probably about halfway into the study program, and I couldn't get in, but I would like just sneak in the back and just like hang out and listen. And that's where, I first met Rachael and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it is like, I moved to Nashville really looking for friendships. And, somewhere along the line, I heard, if you want to make friends, just keep going to the same place over and over again. And I've been doing that for like 9 years now. So, I made some friends. It worked. So, I'm also, learned some Dharma, squashed some suffering. So yeah, it's been great. And so to see where our community is, like, we've always had the intention to meet people where they're at, to give the Dharma in a way that anybody can hear it, right? And at the same time that we do want to deepen our practice. So finding that balance that we can have a way to hold both. And I think that's where we're developing right now. During the lockdown, we did so many intensive workshops. I remember I taught a Satipatthana, I don't know how many, 6-week course on the discourse on mindfulness. And it was twice a week we'd meet and go through the Satipatthana, like line by line. And then we did like a Brahma Vihara course. And then Andrew and I taught the Living the Dharma, like 5-month course online. And so we've been teaching a lot of these introductory workshops to intensive practices. And what I'm seeing is a lot of our classes at Wildheart are now developing in content with the same attitude of introducing it and allowing it to blossom. Like Rachael and Andrew on Sunday morning are covering the 3 marks of existence, anicca, anatta, dukkha, impermanence, suffering, and not self. And then on the Wednesday night, they're doing the same exact thing. And on my Friday night, I'm doing the Satipatthana Sutta. So it's like these geeked out topics, but we're teaching them in a way that I feel is extremely practical. Right. And so that's where this workshop, I shouldn't say workshop, this day-long retreat is way more intensive than anything we've ever done at Wildheart. And I think the Sangha is ready for it. And if they're not, just go dive in.
Okay. Yeah, it's been this interesting thing, like, to notice, like, as we come back together from COVID and the community has really grown. I mean, the mix of like just practice level in the group has shifted, and I don't know about you, Mikey, but it's been an interesting thing for me to contemplate in terms of how I teach and lead a group, about like how to meet the needs of everybody in the group, not at the expense of any one group. And so how to be very, very intentional about teaching in an accessible way. And so I'm so glad we're doing this. And it's so funny. I've watched registrations come in, and we have about 25 people signed up at this point. And I'd say a good 20% of them are like, I'm brand new. And I'm like, that's awesome. How brave of these brand new people to just be like, I'm going to go do this 8-hour intensive workshop, no, practice intensive. So
yeah, we keep on saying workshop.
Right. we said workshop. We've said day-long retreat.
Like it's new to go this intensive.
Practice intensive.
So, I think it may be helpful to maybe deconstruct what the Buddha actually taught on this and what will be the outline based off of this day-long retreat, because we already introduced this concept of suffering or dukkha, right? And the first noble truth is the truth of dukkha. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha, being separated from what is dear is dukkha, being in company of what is not dear is dukkha. And we say these things just like really off the top of our head as Buddhists, right? Dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. But if you look at the first noble truth, the last line of it is very clear that the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. It says, in short, like, I'm wrapping up all of this in one line. In short, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. And so it's not so much the birth, aging, sickness, death, being around people you don't like. It's the idea that we cling to this as I and mine, that we cling to this body that ages. We cling to our beauty that falls apart. We cling to our relationships. We cling to being separated from assholes, right? And so the Buddha said that cling to nothing as I or mine, and nothing. The thoughts, don't cling to the thoughts. Don't cling to the materials. And so this is what the basis of this retreat is, these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. So maybe we could take some time to deconstruct these 5 aggregates. And the first aggregate is the aggregate of form. So this body, that we have a body. And the second aggregate is feelings. And in the Buddhist tradition, we only have really 3 feelings, that everything, every sense that is received in this body is felt as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So we have form, feeling, and then we have perception. And that's the third aggregate, perception. And that we receive information in this body from the 6 senses, and the mind creates an identity of that thing. And so as we see sight, and now that sense input is arising, now I see Justin, right? That you are just colors and forms on a screen, but my mind discriminates those colors and forms into, oh, my friend Justin, right? So we have form, feeling, perceptions, mental inclinations, and now I'm thinking about Justin.
Right.
And then we also have consciousness, and that's a topic I love, but I just want to introduce those. But anything, I'm taking over, Justin. Anything, Rachael, you want to say about these 5 aggregates, or maybe going piece by piece through them?
Man, I love this so much. I feel like we should make like a super nerdy Buddhist meme that's like aggregate's going to aggregate. Like, no problem. Aggregate's not a problem, right? It's clinging. And like, it's such a hard thing for Westerners to wrap their minds around, because I think like we've all kind of inherited it's super nerdy, but like the legacy of Greek philosophy and kind of Judeo-Christian philosophy of like, I think, therefore I am. And then there's the solidly existing me in here somewhere, kind of tucked away outside of time and space, that just doesn't influence or isn't influenced by, the flux and flow of things coming and going. And so it's really kind of mind-blowing, I think, for a lot of folks when we pose it in these introductory classes about like, you're not your thoughts, you're not, and there's no thinker either. Like, you're also not the thinker. And so such a fun exploration. Yeah, because people will say, well, if I'm not my thoughts, oh my God, then who am I? What am I? And come and check it out in the practice intensive, right? That's what it's like. Right. Maybe a little more spaciousness and a little more ease.
That's the hope, right? Yeah. So, I mean, like you were saying, it's like anything that's really observable cannot be self. So if we can observe the body, not self, we can observe the thoughts, not self, but we can observe awareness as well. We can turn awareness back on itself. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I reached enlightenment right now, just through this conversation. Mm-hmm. I don't even have to go to the practice intensive now.
Right.
I'm still going to, obviously.
Yeah. And so this isn't an intellectual thing. It's good to have some intellect, to have a roadmap, but we gotta throw out the roadmap and directly observe this. And so
right, because that's the whole issue, is living life through the lens of concept. More concepts, which collapse experience into these discrete boxes, which just isn't really how things are. And so one of the many things I love about Dharma practice is, I don't know about you guys, but when I was little, I always really wanted to go on adventures. Like, I read a lot of books. We were poor. We didn't have TV. We lived in the woods. So I just read all these Greek mythology books. And I was like, I want to go on adventures when I get older. Like, I want to go on the hero's journey, essentially. And like, I haven't done it as much like geographical traveling as maybe I've wanted to. But when I think about the Dharma, I'm like, man, it's just like the biggest adventure ever. Like, what better adventure is there to go on, other than this, like, really exploring how perception arises and, all the perceptual errors that happen, starting with conceptual mind, that just lead to all this clinging and suffering and friction and, difficult. So
again, I think that these are concepts that are easy to conceptualize. It's easy to intellectualize these things, but it is the direct experience where we get true insight, and that really came up for me when I did that Goenka retreat. There was this really deep insight into impermanence and anicca. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, arising and passing away, arising and passing away, and like really like experiencing that firsthand over the course of 10 days is like, okay, now it's a different thing than just the intellectual pursuit of it.
So talk about beginner's mind sometimes in Zen, and sometimes a literal beginner's mind is really helpful. So the 20% of people signing up for this it may actually be helpful. I go into treatment centers and teach meditations. First day anybody's meditated, I'll teach mindfulness of the mind, and I'll have them concentrate their mind and then open up their awareness to their thoughts. And then, I love the quote of Menindraji, how, a thought of your mother is not your mother, it's a thought. And I say, you're not your thoughts. Knowing thoughts is thoughts, nothing more, nothing less. And then I just see it in their face, right? Like, I'm not my thoughts. And then literally people, this has happened to me twice, stop me, then what am I? And I say, well, now we're stepping into the spiritual, because it's not my job to say, oh, the Buddha said this and that and that and this. Now we're stepping into the spiritual, and this is where true discovery can happen.
Right.
But we are so self-identified with the material realm that we miss the spiritual world, right? And when we just take a step back from the material world, we could step into something more beautiful, sunyata, emptiness, voidness, love, right? And we're not doing this as a way to be awesome, look how great I am at meditating, I broke free from the construct of self, I am so egoless, our ego and our egolessness. What we're doing is trying to find happiness. So deconstructing the self, be happy. And this is how to be happy, right? And one thing Rachael said, and I've been meaning to bring it up to her, is she brought up perceptual errors. I heard this phrase, sideways mullet. So,
What was that?
okay, mullet is business in the front, party in the back.
Right.
So
My kid has that haircut.
Yeah, it's huge now, right? Mullets are huge, but sideways mullets is the idea that the left brain is business and the right brain is a party, right? And so much of our awareness is that perceptual brain of the left brain that's all business, right? And so we're thinking about things and judging things and fixing and controlling things. Fuck that. Go to the party side. Go have a party in your right brain and just rest in the actual sensations of arising and passing of sound, and watch that short part of the haircut try to say, oh, well, that's a sound of this, that's a sound of a car, that's a sound of a blah blah blah. Man, no, fuck that. Let's go party, and let's just experience sound directly without having to judge it or make up a story about it. Right. So I heard that phrase last week, sideways mullet. I was like, that's so genius. Did that make sense? Yeah, I just started going on but anybody listening to this, do they understand that there's a left and right brain? They have two different functions. And yeah. Okay.
And again, how awesome that our conceptual mind keeps our bodies alive. It is so good at that. What an amazing evolutionary thing it's done for us. And dude, totally at the expense of happiness, well-being, ease, and compassion. Shit.
It's that whole wired for survival, not for happiness thing. It gets me every time. Yeah, I'm gonna go experience some non-judgmental sounds after this podcast. I'm going to a punk show. It's gonna be amazing. Yeah.
Who are you seeing?
Antanana Trio, Dead Devils, and Tokyo Coyote. Yeah, local stuff.
Yeah.
Antanana Trio. They're from Tokyo, so
cool.
Yeah, it should be a fun time. They always put on a really good show. Them and Daikaiju always put on a really good show.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah, they do.
Yeah.
With the masks and everything.
Yeah.
They've been around a long time. Huh?
Yeah, they're amazing. I try to catch them every time they're down here.
Yeah. They're from Mobile, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, don't quote me on that, but I think so.
So Rachael, that is it's like surf rock experimental stuff, but they wear masks and they just break everything, right? They're just very aggressive surf rock, maybe. Fantastic. And what's their name again? I can never say it right.
Daikaiju?
Yeah.
So I will say, like, my kid is 8 and totally into Power Rangers right now, which is not as horrible as it used to be when we were all kids in the 90s. It's actually pretty cool. I'm like, oh yeah, me and my kid could jam out to this, like aggro, like surf punk. Like I do Power Ranger moves together. I feel like it would be good for that. So
Yeah, probably. I think it would align perfectly with that mission. Well, this practice intensive that's coming up sounds fucking awesome. Honestly, like I'm super stoked. Like I'm setting aside time and I'm driving up and I'm either going to crash it at Roy's house or at Gina's house or somewhere wherever they will have me. I will be there.
Oh yeah.
On the 15th for sure.
yeah.
Are you guys thinking? Do you guys have any intentions of doing any more like really like practice intensives of this nature on different topics?
We haven't discussed this, but my hope is that like this is trial run and then we replicate it, and keep doing this. I mean, I think about like what's the thing that pulls suffering up by its roots. It's this. Like we can chop branches down and that's helpful, but it's like we really want to excavate out the roots. Like this is it. Here it is. And you know, I'm so excited about being in a little bit of a different role at Wildheart now because I really want to teach more intensives. So did a good series of workshops last year with my friend Ryan on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma, and they were practice focused. And so I hope that we can replicate this or do more practice focused work. I mean, I really want to help people have a relationship with practice so that they can take it outside of the practice intensive and replicate it in their lives. So yeah, it's cool. We're going to like do an hour on each aggregate. Like it's going to be a lot and intro and closure. So it's going to be sweet.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I love really deep dive stuff like that. Like, but I'm a huge like Dharma nerd. So, of course I'd be into that idea. Like, yeah, Buddhist psychology, day-long practice. Yeah, let's do it. Like, sign me up.
Well, I think it's also helpful for the listener that may be thinking about going to this to understand also, what is Buddhist psychology and what is Buddhism? What's the Buddhist Dharma, the teachings of the Dharma versus modern psychology, right? That I work in mental health, Rachael works in mental health, and there is discrepancies of differences. So one thing I do want anybody that's thinking about going to know where, modern Western psychology has a lot of validation for the self. You're going to be looking at your own personal suffering, your own personal story, your past and how it's affected your present and your own personal traumas and diagnosis, right? And that's awesome. That is great. And at the same time, Buddhism looks at the universal. You may look at your own personal suffering, but in Buddhism, we're looking at the universal truth of suffering. We're looking at the universal uncovering of the self. So it's understanding the Dharma, the way things are, rather than our own personal. So in this intensive, what I'm concerned about is it isn't going to be talking about traumas. It's going to be deconstructing the self, right? So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? We're like so much of all of the Dharma is about moving beyond the content of the mind, right? Because content of mind is just, one more of the sensory channels of information that's impersonal, just like the other sense doors. And so really moving beyond content and having this much more global perspective onto the mechanics and the movements. And and I think if anybody's listening and curious and, considering attending this workshop or any other workshop on Buddhist psychology, it's so interesting to me. I think one of the things I love about the Dharma is that we're never being asked to adopt a set of beliefs because like we can't conceptualize our way out of samsara. Like that's not going to help. It's the problem actually. And so never, like in the early Buddhist teachings, was the Buddha trying to make us adopt a series of fixed views or content in any way at all. And so I think many Westerners are confused by this, right? Because like expertise and wisdom is about like knowing a set of things so you can be really capable and competent in those things. And, never, and it's curious too. I don't know about you, Mikey, but I often get the question on Sunday mornings when I'm teaching on this topic in general about like, oh, the Buddha taught that there was no self. Isn't that what the Buddha taught? And I'm like, no, that's not at all what we're getting into. Like, we don't have opinions about the existence or non-existence of things, right? Those would be extremes either way. But, we want to look at how these perceptions and how these identities lead towards or away from suffering,
Mm.
towards or away from happiness. So self is a strategy, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love just the focus on happiness. It's like that's what this practice is about. It's like happiness in the here and now. Let's not put it off till later. Not get wrapped up with the if onlys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for happiness right now. And that's really what drew me into this. Is like, that's what I want. I want to be happy like right now, because right now I am suffering tremendously.
It's available.
I mean, not right now, but back then.
Yeah, you're talking to your friends now. But yeah, that the Dharma teaches us a happiness not born of this world. And my teacher, the Venerable Panyawadi, would often say, if you find a happiness not born of this world, that means the world can't take it away. And this happiness isn't dependent on conditions. It's not dependent on the conditions of our body. It's not dependent on the conditions of our jobs. It's not even dependent on the conditions of our thoughts or emotions. It's something much deeper. And that's what I'm talking about, the spiritual aspect of the Dharma that is beautiful and empty and void and loving.
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah, she's a gem. Panawadi's such a gem. I'm so happy that I got to spend some time with her in October. It was a lovely retreat. Yeah. Good times. So speaking of other retreats that are coming up, you guys are doing a 4-day retreat in Bay St. Louis in July, right?
Correct. July 6th through the 9th. So it's coming up on Independence Day weekend. And, independence is just an illusion. So we're calling it Interdependence Day weekend retreat. So July 6th through the 9th in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And it will be a compassion meditation retreat. We'll be embracing pain. And, compassion has a lovely connotation. We talk about compassion and everybody's like, yeah, compassion's so nice. But the actual practice of compassion, what makes it unique is its willingness to be in pain. So we'll be spending the whole weekend honoring, validating, nurturing, and loving what is painful in our experience. And so please come out if you have the courage to do so. And when I say the courage to do so, it will be held and supported with care. It is in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Will be the summertime. We'll be right by the water. There'll be those nice breezes on that beautiful Gulf Coast. So I almost said Gulf Coast. I almost sounded like authentically from the Gulf Coast, which I am, but I never picked up that accent of the Gulf. But Gulf Coast.
Is it like residential only, Mikey, or can people commute in? What's the housing situation with that?
There is, I think, a commuter option. Yeah, I would suggest staying there, though, because it's 100%. A rad spot. And the other thing is, yes, I am teaching it. And then Andrew Chapman is teaching it with me. And then Callan Dawn, one of the facilitators at Wildheart, she will be assisting the retreat.
Fantastic. That's going to be amazing. Yeah, I love Callan. She's such a wonderful person. Mm-hmm. I'm so happy that we were able to go through the training together. Mm-hmm. It was I love so many of those people. Literally every one of them, like family. Mm-hmm. It was just a bonding experience, that facilitator training. And it's so nice to see so many people actually doing the thing and using that to spread the Dharma. Richie Essenberg in Marietta, Georgia, is doing Marietta mindfulness and or mindful Marietta, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just Pat Carter in Mobile, mm-hmm. and Maddie Finn and Roy Wyman in Nashville. Like everybody's they're doing the thing, and it's so awesome to see that. I just love that.
Yep, we're taking over Wildheart Meditation Center over the world. You want to get involved? Come on in. Yeah.
The gates to the deathless are open.
Yeah. I think that's what I was saying, right?
Hey, well, thank you all so much for taking the time to have this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to the practice intensive.
There we go.
Coming up in a couple of weeks. It's going to be amazing. But I'll definitely do my best to get the word out and try to get as many people involved as possible. And thank you guys for the work that you do for the Dharma and for the Nashville community and for the world itself.
Yeah. Thank you. Right back at you. Thank you for being a person of service. And thank you for spreading the good news of the Dharma, the good news of dukkha. And I love you deeply. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again to Rachael and Mikey for being on the show. And if you'd like any information on the practice intensive coming up at Wildheart Meditation Center, you can go to wildheartmeditationcenter.org. If you're interested in the upcoming retreat in July in Bay St. Louis, check out floweringlotusmeditation.org. And if you're ever in the Pensacola area and you feel like joining a meditation group, check out gulfcoastdharma.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. As usual, this has been Dharma Junkie. I'm Justin. Namaste.
Near with the